All right, everybody, welcome back. Welcome back. Woo. Live from Burbank, California. This is KJCR. Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Follow us on Twitter. That's at KJCR. Fade to Black. You go over to YouTube. You can email us. Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. We'll be getting to that stuff in just a second. I would like to welcome to the show right now Ralph Wolf McCarron. Ralph was on the board of MUFON-LA since 1992. I need to explain that is 21 years as their technical director, webmaster, and video analyst. Since 2001, he's a member of LA UFORG, and that is the Los Angeles UFO Research Group, and that was started over at UCLA right here in Los Angeles. And then with Ann Druffel, Mr. McCarron took 4 years to catalog. He's going to tell us all about this in just a second. The James McDonald Archive. He is considered one of the original investigators of Area 51. He is listed on UFOmind.com as one of the people related to Area 51. I'd like to welcome to the program right now, Ralph Wolf McCarron. Wolf, how are you, sir?
Good, buddy. How you doing?
We've got a lot to talk about.
Yes, we do.
And before we get, because what we're going to do with Wolf is we're gonna talk for about an hour, and then in the second hour we're going to be taking your phone calls, and everything will be on Skype, and we'll get to that in just a little bit, and I'll give you the secret Skype number that won't be secret anymore. But before we get to all of that, I asked the same thing of Jason Martell. I asked this of every single guest. What got you into this? What got you into this research? You've been doing it for almost half of your life or longer. What got you into doing this type of research?
When I was 12 years old, I read Chariots of the God.
Okay.
Erich Von Daniken's book, which was published in '68. So,
did you see the movie when it was in first run
at
the theater?
Yeah,
I did too. Changed me.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, you know what was funny, and we're just going to talk. We're friends, but when that movie came out and that book came out at that age, I just thought, why doesn't everybody know about this? It makes sense to me. Did it do the same thing for you?
Yeah, yes, no. I mean, it just intrigued me to get into the field and just start reading everything I could on the subject, basically. So I started really young, and then I just read as much as I could.
Well, the original group of guys, let's get right into Area 51 because we will run out of time before you know it. The original group of guys, and you and I were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, but UFOmind.com really changed it for me. Like Chariots of the Gods, there's a few seminal moments with everybody. And UFO Mind, and I'm going to guess here and say 1996, 1995, 1996, AOL 1.0. UFO Mind, when I discovered that website, and I have no idea how many, it seems like probably 1,000 pages of stuff, of data, and back then, extensive. It would be extensive today, but back then it was crazy. I spent probably the better part of 2 months reading and clicking on every single link on that site. And after a couple of months, I'll never forget it. I clicked on the last link. I was done, and I was almost depressed. But that website, it was so, and I just want to put this in the right frame of mind for everybody. It was so comprehensive. It was right. It was spot on the money, and it talked about everything in such a factual way and so forth. But you were on that website. You were one of the original people linked to Area 51 on UFOmind.com, and that is a very important thing. So that original group of guys, and I'm just setting this up for everybody. We're talking about Jim Goodall, John Lear, jump in if I miss anybody, Sean Morton, Huff, Gene Huff,
Norio
Hayakawa, George Knapp, Bob Lazar, right? That original core group of guys. There's only maybe 10 names on that list. You're one of those names. So take us back to that time, and how did you get into that, and how did you find, was it even called Area 51 back then?
Yeah, well, there are different names for it. There's the ranch, the box. Pilots call it the box. Dreamland. There's so many different names that they called it, but that there's not really ever been an official name. But different people that worked there, whatever, had called it different things, but it was never released till later.
Was it called Area 51 when you started your research?
Well, that was part of the plotting of the way the government plotted the land maps or whatever. There's like an Area 10 and Area 12. There's all these different areas, so that was just one of the designations. But it had different names. Some people that worked there called it the ranch.
Right. Okay. So and that's where S4 got its designation too, because that was just a position on a map.
Yeah. Well, there's two. Well, there's kind of, most people don't know this, but there's actually two S4s. It's kind of confusing because there's S4 that Lazar talks about near Papoose Lake, but there actually is a Site 4 that in Tonopah that's used to test radar. Like, we have all the radars in the world there from Russia, from Japan, and when we test stealth aircraft or what have you, not the Site 4 is where they have all these radars from all over the world, different countries, where they jam the planes and try to see if they're stealth or whatever, see if they can.
And that's a missile test range, right, Tonopah?
Tonopah was tested. That's where they tested the stealth aircraft. I mean, well, they built it at Lockheed. They transported to Area 51. It was test flown there, and then they once the R&D is done, they basically have these little miniature hangars out in Tonopah, like 18, 20 hangars where the stealths would stay, and the guys that flew them lived on the base and worked out there for months at a time, and they just flew it and got it ready for the final stages before it went off to war or whatever.
Okay, well, take us back to that time. Okay, so what year was this? Your first trip out? What year?
Well, I started reading.
And who did you go with?
Well, I started early on. I think I read an article about Lazar in UFO Magazine, which was published by Don Ecker and Vicky Ecker, and I was intrigued by the Lazar story and about Area 51. Back then, nobody really knew where Area 51 was or how to get to it or whatever. Only guys that were kind of like guys that maybe worked at Edwards or guys that kind of were black op kind of guys would kind of knew kind of where it was, but not really. So I read that article and I was interested into it. So I went to a UFO convention and sure enough, Norio's there. And Norio and I meet the first time. And he's got all his pictures of all the satellite pictures of Area 51 and whatnot. And this was probably back like in 90 or 91. It was the UFO expos that were held at the LA Hyatt Regency hotels, the real early ones. And that's one that where Lear spoke at, and even William Cooper was at too.
Oh, Bill Cooper.
And I actually got videos of both of those. They're not widely seen on the internet, but I actually have video of both of those talks. But that's kind of how I got interested into it, and then I just started going. I was already in MUFON. I was already you're talking. I started when I was like 12 years old, so I already had this. But I started getting away of regular UFO research and getting into my own research. Like I wasn't really wanted to be involved with MUFON and that kind of thing. I kind of wanted to do my own and kind of get away and start. I figured if anybody knows where the stuff is at, it's going to be the military. So I started getting involved in black ops research. So that's kind of where I focused my research. And then I started. I produced a video back in like '91 that was sold through UFO Magazine that told people, it's called the Area 51 Viewer's Guide, and it basically told people how to get to Area 51.
Okay.
So I sold like 500, 600 copies, and it was people would buy it just so they could know how to get to Area 51. Because this is early internet. This is before people didn't know, it was real early internet, so people didn't really know how to get out there.
So what did you do? Did you just head up the highway looking for the black mailbox?
Well, I started doing like these little solo ventures by myself. But then after I had my videotapes out, I started getting kind of a little bit of a fan base. But I met another guy up on Freedom Ridge back in the day. This is the early days before you used to be able to hike to Freedom Ridge. You have to go on the backside. You couldn't get around the border because it was blocked by the guards. Actually, the security guards at the base actually originally blew it up with dynamite. There was another little road that was actually accessible to get in, but it was still inside the border. But they still knew that. The guards knew that, but they didn't want to be going in there. So we used to have to hike up the backside. It's a 2-hour hike.
Biden?
This roadblock was cleared on January 2nd, 1994. It is an illegal roadblock. It was cleared by the workers of the Whitesides Defense Committee. Glenn Campbell, chief engineer. This roadblock was not cleared by Sean Morton.
You may or may not believe this. That Blazer has made it through. He's coming up the canyon. They're taking a right just outside the boundary. He's going to try to drive it to Whiskey 3. Stopped two individuals. They're out checking the boundary and looking around. I'm not exactly sure of the location of the camera. However, as you come up the valley, come to the perimeter, hang a right, and go towards Whiskey 3 Summit. They're about halfway up the hill now, attempting to turn around. Approximately 100 yards just on the other side of that gorge outside the boundary. Keep me advised, if they just cross the boundary, you know what to do. Keep me advised, if they just cross the boundary, you know what to do.
And I met a partner of mine that actually bought my videotape. I'm sitting in a lawn chair on Freedom Ridge, and this guy comes up, and we're talking about stuff, and he's like, oh, yeah, I bought this. How do you know how to get up here? You go, oh, I bought this videotape. He goes, oh, you're Ralph McCarron? Oh, I bought your tape. So here's a guy that bought my tape that I met, but it ended up we became good friends, like lifelong friends after this. But he's a guy that was actually became a part of my team. I started assembling a team of guys to go out there, have a pilot that flew for Sky West.
Well, before we get I want you to set up. How did your first trip? I mean, you're going out. You got maps in your hand, I guess.
Right.
What are you looking for? How do you know?
Well, the black mailbox was the first thing. That's the beacon or the 2001 Space Odyssey. You know
Okay, so the monolith.
It's a monolith.
Yeah, right. Okay, so you're out the first time and you find the black mailbox.
Yeah,
and you make a right hand turn.
It's the only mailbox on Highway 375, the only one. So yeah, that's what people in the early days you just camp out at that mailbox, and people would go and just put their and you're talking. It's like that's still 12 miles away from the border, not from Area 51, but just the border. So people would just stay there because they didn't really know where to. People kind of knew where to look. Like, hey, you look, this way, and that's kind of this mountain range, and that's kind of where lights come in. But people back then would look always at the Janet flights coming in, and people thought they were UFOs, and they weren't. They were just the workers coming in, and the planes would leave like at 4 a.m. outside of McCarron Airport across from the Luxor, and people thought they were seeing this UFO. It was actually the Janet, the plane coming at you for a little while. So it looks like a UFO. It looks like it's hovering because you're looking at an aircraft, right? A 737, and then it would make a turn, right? And the turn would be, it's turning, so it's going to land at Area 51, right? So people would, for years, would just, look at this plane and think it was a UFO. But it wasn't not, and a lot of guys like Sean Morton and stuff like that would take people out to see this UFO, and it wasn't a UFO, it was a jet.
Who else would you see out there when you were out there? Was it guys like Sean Morton?
Yeah, I went on a trip with Sean a long time ago. When he used to do, I took one of his trips just for fun. This was back in the day with a couple friends of mine, and we went out there. But we did see some interesting things. We would go stay at a place called Campfire Hill, which is it's halfway down Groom Lake Road, and it was a place where a lot of researchers would stay and hang out and get binoculars and whatnot and look at the base. And we used to hike a peak called Whitesides. This is before Freedom Ridge was even in existence, or Glenn Campbell was the one who discovered Freedom Ridge. Gary Schultz is the one who kind of him and his wife discovered kind of Whitesides. At least like maybe, hey, that mountain, we can hike up that. Maybe that's still within the border. So I would hike up there with a backpack and put my cameras back there, my video cameras. And I was one of the early guys that actually was able to shoot the base without getting caught because I would hide my cameras and stuff and not let the guards. The guards saw that you had cameras. They would basically contact the security, but it still I knew from Alamo, it would take another 45 minutes for the sheriff to come to get me. So by that time, I'd already hiked down the mountain and be gone, you know.
Were you ever arrested?
No, because I would always, we back in the day, we had scanners. We'd monitor the sheriff. We'd monitor all the guards. This is when they were in the clear. They weren't encrypted. So this is early. This is like 92, you know. So I was able to listen to all the guards talking. It was like a cat and mouse game. We would listen to the guards. The guards could never figure out how we knew what they were doing all the time because, you know, we were listening to them, but at the time they didn't know it.
But you're lugging up. You're taking with you.
It was an
video cameras,
SVHS,
telescopes, binoculars, folding chairs.
Yeah, and Whitesides was the first mountain that we would hike up, and I was the first to get video footage of the base, and all this stuff was, you know, in the early days, it was like eventually all the footage that people see on documentaries, most of that footage came from me of the base. It's you know, I was contacted by Learning Channel, Discovery, what have you, History. I mean, just goes on and on. They knew like I was the Area 51 guy to get footage of the base, whether it was the guards, Pavehawks coming after me or whatever.
Okay, so before I ask the obvious question, which is, you know, what was the coolest thing? You know, what did you see? What was the one thing and all of that? I want to ask you a couple of questions about some of the things that Bob Lazar has gone on the record and mentioned and talk about, such as when he talks about Papoose Lake and S4 and these the hangars on the sides of mountains. I'm not in any way discrediting anything that Bob Lazar has said, but did you see anything that would back up maybe what Bob Lazar had said, and as well as some of the test flights that he was talking about with some of the craft? Well,
I can get into what I saw in '93 out there with a group of people. This was I think the Sean Morton trip, but I saw something. I mean, I don't know still today what it was, but we did see something that looked like a star that was just sitting in the sky for a long period of time, and it basically just kind of dropped out of the sky but stopped like over the base, like it didn't fall like a meteor. It didn't keep going. It stopped and it kind of hovered there for a while, grew really bright, and then it slowly kind of lowered itself into the base. And then there was another time where we saw somebody they were watching the sky, but they saw like a section of the sky move, almost like a piece of the sky. Like it's like you're watching the stars all of a sudden, and you see this huge section of the sky move. And I've heard
like a cut and paste, or
yeah, like something like let's say there's a triangle in the sky and you see it move, like it's like a chunk of the sky moved. I've heard other people in the past about UFOs, seeing people having sightings, seeing things like this where, you know how you talk about like a triangle where it's cloaked and it looks like something's moving, almost like the Schwarzenegger movie, The Predator, you know, where you kind of look at something, it's invisible, but then
distorted.
It's like, it trips you out, like you're not sure what you're looking at. It was kind of like that kind of thing. But we did see it, and it's kind of weird, and I can't even explain it, but that's what it kind of.
Do you have anything posted online? I don't want to jump ahead, but is there anything posted online?
About that, no.
Okay. So you're up there, and like I said, the way that Bob Lazar, and this is not a Bob Lazar show, but he certainly had some pretty fascinating things to say, and he was first, or, you know, one of the first. But with the testing of craft, you're up on top of the hill, you've got your binoculars, you've got your video camera, you've got your friends, you've got a folding chair. Did you ever see a craft?
No, not at 51. Well, at Area 51, they would do all their tests, and this was like, you know, not, you could just black test, let's say. You know, Lazar used to say they did them on Wednesdays at a certain time, and it was always at 7 o'clock or whatever in the morning or whatever, and Sean would do the same thing, take people out there. But a lot of tests are done because I monitor the base. I have a group of researchers. We do scanner, you know, frequency research where we have scanners, and, you know, we bring in, we had, you know, frequencies, control tower frequencies to the tower.
All players, be advised, Venom is RTB for fuel.
Say again, you're broken. Venom, go Dreamland. Venom, go Dreamland.
We ran the guards. This is in the early days. We had a lot of frequencies to the planes. We could hear the pilots. We recorded hours and hours of data from Area 51 as far as research.
X-ray off and data on when ready. Just let you go ahead. You don't have to go through Dreamland. I'll just clear you off this frequency. Dreamland, strike one. Strike one, Dreamland.
All players to the ranch house.
Sir, you need to turn around, go back to your area, because you need to check out sensor 1077, 1078, and 1066, copy?
Okay,
could you contact Adjustment 8 and have them take a look at the data coming off of that system and see if it's okay? I sure will.
Okay, right-hand turn to west.
Negative, negative. We got airspace west by 3 to 5 miles. Can we go left east?
Janelle Patrol, Channel 778, 15,000.
We've got an intruder in the airspace here that they're running intercept on right now.
Range is 65 and range 63. The ranges are going hot at this time.
A lot of the they would do stuff in the morning, like around 10 o'clock. Lunchtime is always quiet. They break off, and then they gear up for stuff at night. But stuff was always done at night as far as testing. And as far as Lazar goes, there's, with Stan Freeman and everything like that, Stan researched him pretty well thoroughly and could never really prove his education background or whether he went to certain things. So I still kind of on the fence with Lazar,
Mm-hmm.
and there's some weird things with his, social security number with not a social security number, his ID number on his badge. That there's that story about Goodall asking a guy, you've heard that story, right?
Yep,
in the Pentagon and whatnot. And, but as far as having any proof, anything flying out of S4, that I never really garnered until I had a talk with the hiker archaeologist Jerry Freeman.
Okay, well, we're going to get to Jerry Freeman in just a second, but when you film and you say the action is always at night, was there anything that you couldn't explain? Well, because, and the reason why I'm getting to that, it could have been Aurora, could have been some type of, not only Aurora, but anything else, drones. All the technology that we have today was tested back then. But was there anything that you just couldn't explain away as an airplane?
Except that one incident in 1993 that was the only incident. Everything else since then was, either B-2s going up and down the base doing testing. We always knew when they were doing testing because you have to understand that we were monitoring the base with scanners. So we had all the frequencies to the tower, to the ground crews, everything. And we could know they would basically, they'd basically say when they're going to do a, at 0800 hours or whatever, when the test was going to go down. So we already knew when they were going to test because we were tapped into the frequencies. So we would know when stuff would go off at night. We just wait around. And a lot of times it was 2 in the morning till 6 in the morning. There was one strange incident where they were, this was really nuts because this was in the early days. They kept trying to, they were pissed because their encryption wasn't working. They're trying to go scramble to go to digital. And they wouldn't work. They said, well, should we go in the clear? Should we go in the clear? And that whole night, I have this whole thing recorded, this whole thing at Area 51 on tape. I still have it. And they were like moving around these satellite trucks. Like I almost imagine, like I assumed that they were trying to do some type of GPS kind of hooking up with satellites. They kept moving these trucks. But Area 51 is mostly a lot of weapons. Okay, they do all kinds of weaponry there and lasers, things like that. Stealth planes outfitted with lasers. It's all like black weaponry. Now could it be UFO weaponry? Could a UFO be a weapon? Sure it could. But that part of it I don't know. But I do have some really crazy stories about people that I know inside of Rachel, the little alien that I've talked to. That their husbands are dead. He's worked there, but I've heard all kinds of crazy stories I can tell you. And
well, let's get to Jerry Freeman.
Okay.
So Jerry Freeman was a teacher. He's a teacher.
Yeah, he was a teacher, Parablossom High or something like that. Or
he was an educator,
yeah,
and he decided
historian
and he's going to go check out the 49ers, who were the pioneers to the West Coast.
He was an avid hiker. He could climb Mount Whitney and stuff, and he was a teacher at Parablossom High. But the way I came upon his story is he actually was looking for the 49ers, the pioneers. He was with his daughters. He was researching the trail, through America. They eventually died in Death Valley. If you look up the pioneers, the 49ers, but he was researching their whole trail and trying to retrace the steps of what they did. And there's an inscription that they did. They basically went through Papoose Lake S4, and there was an inscription they made in Nye Canyon of some marking, the 49ers there in the wall there.
Now, who said this inscription was made?
I don't know. I guess it's known or something. People
Okay.
that study the 49ers know that it was in their journals, I think.
Okay, gotcha.
Or something. And so Jerry back then contacted Nellis Air Force Range, like, hey, I'm a teacher, I'm a historian, I'm researching the 49ers. Can I get access to he knew that their trail went through Papoose Lake or went through there, that area.
Which was all of it is right there. You have
Near
the
Area
test
51.
ranges, Nellis, Area 51,
Yeah.
S4. It's all right there, and he's planning some type of hike
Right.
to go through the test ranges, Nellis Air Force
Which
Base,
is
and
way illegal.
right,
You
and
can't do
possibly
that.
Area 51. Okay, so
Yeah.
pick it up. Go
So
ahead.
You can't do that. So they told him, of course, he called the base and said, "Can I do this?" And they turned him down, of course, because it's going through the border of 51 and the whole Nellis Range, which is highly secure. So he couldn't get it. So he eventually was just like, screw it, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to go in. He had his brother drop him off, like on the I forget which side of the base, like the south side or something. And that was an area where the guards don't really hang. The guards are mostly hang out near Groom Lake and the North Gate and stuff like that. That's where they kind of monitor where all the tours come in and that
The
kind of thing.
375.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So they don't. He came in an area that was actually kind of smart because it was something that's really not. You could basically kind of, if you know what you're doing, kind of hike in and kind of go undetected. Now he hiked. He was really smart because during the daytime he stayed on the hills, so he didn't want any road traffic or any guards see him. So he there's actually if you look at a map, there's a hill range that follows kind of into Papoose Lake. So during the day he hiked. He said he hiked as fast as he could during the day, and then and every time he see a car, he ducked down. Like if he saw a car, like there's a little road that goes through S4 right there where S4 supposedly is. So he'd see a vehicle, he ducked down. He's always paranoid that the guards are going to see him. Or
He's
whatever.
by himself.
He's by himself. He's hiked, and he leaves canteens. So when he comes back, he's not going to run out of water because you got to worry about water when you hike. So he left a bunch of canteens coming in, and so when you go back, he'd have water. So he took all kinds of pictures. It's I can give you a link to it.
Well, before
I
want everybody to understand that this is a very famous story, but all of this is firsthand. You spoke to him directly, and he told you. Yeah, he told you every detail on the story. I want to set the record straight. This isn't hearsay.
Right.
You've spoken.
Oh, yeah.
He told you the entire story himself. Now, the guards, the security at Nellis has told him, no, you cannot come in and check out anything. This is off limits, top secret security, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So, but he's taken it upon himself to do some type of day hike, or is this now a 2-day hike?
It's like a 4-day or
4-day hike. So this guy is going through the desert.
Yeah.
Through the Nellis test range, adjacent to Area 51, undetected, looking for an inscription in a cave somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What does he see?
Okay. Well, he eventually gets the thing that I was most wanted to know was Papoose Lake, of course, S4, because Lazar always said there's hangar doors and there's lights that come up, whatnot at nighttime, and then they test the aircraft. So I told Jerry, I said, when you were at S4, he took a picture of him inside, the Nellis Range, taking a picture of the
Right there on the dry lake
yeah,
bed?
the Papoose Mountains, right? So where these supposed hangar doors are. So he told me, I said, did you see any lights when you were there at nighttime? He spent the night up there looking at the Papoose Mountains. Do you see anything? There's a little road where he sees the security traffic, what have you. And he said that at nighttime he did see some lights at the bottom of the base that looked like a hangar door was opening, and like these lights were really bright. He didn't see anything fly out of it or anything like that, but he did say he saw these bright lights at the bottom of the mountain, and then the doors shut. And that's the only reference I ever heard of anybody outside that physically saw something outside of Lazar's story. So that's why I still kind of on the fence with Lazar, because it still shows that this guy did see something at the base there, like hangar doors that opened up at night, but nothing flew out. So,
but he's the first, probably the only guy to corroborate
Right.
Lazar's story.
At least that there's something kind of there as far as a facility or something, as far as a facility being there. So
Where is this photograph?
his wife has it.
Have you seen it?
No, I've seen pictures of it that were
Published?
He did an interview. Well, it was like for a magazine cover, but I've seen the picture of it. Yeah. But that's it. But
well, what did you see when you saw the picture?
just a picture of the mountains, the Papoose Mountains.
Okay, so nothing.
Not a night shot or nothing like that. He didn't have any infrared or anything like in cameras or anything like that.
Okay, so
he was hiking light. You know what I mean?
So he gets in, and what else did he tell you that he saw before he got out?
Well, he was just trying to get that inscription, and the inscription. He's told me if he was running out of light, he was dying of thirst. He said if I had 1 or 2 more hours, I would have been able to. He was trying to take a photo of that inscription of the 49ers. So he eventually got out. He hiked his way back. He came into trouble with there's like the guard shack, and he was dying of thirst, and his canteen was low. He actually hustled to the back of the guard shack, and there were guards in there. There was a security truck, and he filled up his water bottle. He found a hose, filled his water bottle really back, and snuck back out. But he was like right on these guys at the shack. So he got out, and he got away with it. And you know, he was just one of the few guys to get inside 51 without being detected by the guards.
When did he pass away?
What was it? It was a couple years back, right? 20.
He died of cancer?
Yeah, he died of cancer. Yeah, prostate cancer.
Did he ever write a book? Okay, well, before I get to that, so there is closure to this story where he says, and well, I'll let you tell the story. He gets to the cave and he finds what?
Well, no, not that cave. This is... Oh, that's not
That is a crazy part of this story, though.
But that's not Night Canyon. That's outside of 51.
Okay, still about the 49ers, though.
Yeah. This was a different cave. This was prior to any of this even happening. He was just hiking, and he walks into this cave on the trail before Nellis, and he finds this box that he just gave it up to the museum, like, I found this, but claiming it was supposedly had some items in it. It was supposed to be the 49ers or the Pioneers box, but it ended up being where the box had glue in it. So a lot of people blamed him for this hoax, like that he found this box of the 49ers and it was a hoax and it wasn't real. So when a lot of people see that, they think that he was a hoaxer. He did this, but he says that he just found it and presented to the museum. So there's no really proof of us knowing that. But some people try to discredit him against him actually hiking into Papoose Lake because of this incident. So it's kind of...
Well, supposedly in this trunk, and this has nothing to do, again, with Area 51, but this kind of debunks his own story, and it's a fascinating story about sneaking in to Nellis and Area 51 looking for something else. And I'm sure you talked to him about UFOs, but we'll talk about that in a second. But he says that he finds this trunk, and in this trunk, a pair of shoes, baby shoes, a telescope, a doll, like a straw doll, a couple of books, some money was in this trunk. And so tell us what happened.
Well, if people want to look for it, it was on an episode of Mysteries at the Museum, that one show that's on TV, so you can probably YouTube it or whatever. But it's about the trunk and about that thing. So, but that was just a thing about the only reason I tell this story is because it gives some validity to Lazar. That's the only reason.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break, Wolf. And when we come back, let's pick it up. I want to talk about some Russian research. I would like to get into that. Planes that are over at what is actually being tested over at Area 51 today, and your thoughts on that. All right. Now, do shoot us an email to Jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. You can follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Facebook. You can go and like us on the Jimmy Church Radio Fade to Black fan page. This is the Dark Matter Radio Network. We still have another 90 minutes, 2 segments left. Ralph Wolf McCarron, I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black. We will be back right after this. Stay with us. All right, everybody, welcome back. This is Fade to Black, Friday night, December 20th. That's right. It is 5 days before Christmas. And we are live from the JP Motorsports Studios right here in Burbank, California. And for KJCR and the Dark Matter Radio Network, I'd like to welcome everybody to the show. All right. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Shoot us an email to Jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. Oops. Sorry about that. Shoot me an email to Jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com, and you can also do that over on the website. All right. There were a bunch of documents, Wolf. We're in the studio with Ralph Wolf McCarron. I've known him as Wolf for years. It's hard to say Ralph. A bunch of NSA documents that were just released.
Yeah, there are like 2,900 of them.
All on
pages, yeah.
Area 51, secret aircraft, Soviet MiGs. What can you tell us about it? I know you've been checking them out. I have looked briefly. It's a mountain, and when I say mountain of material. But what stands out?
Well, I mean, they talk about stuff kind of already known in the field as far as Tacit Blue and Oxcart and some of the early stuff, but there's no alien body things there. There's none of that. It's just basically stuff that they decided to kind of declassify because it's been a while. But it's kind of stuff that's already kind of been through the people kind of public knowledge kind of know about. I'm still going through the documents because there's a lot of them, a lot of pages to read, but and still trying to clean. The one thing that caught my eye that brought to me, which was pretty wild, is there's been this security manual for the guards at Area 51 that I've been in possession for like 15 years. It's never been. We kind of kept this under our hat, certain people in the field, and I guess I can talk about it now, but it was released. One of the guards that worked at Area 51 kind of slipped it to another researcher friend of ours, and then we've had this document for a while. A lot of people that were other Area 51 researchers thought this thing was hoaxed, wasn't real, but they finally released it, which is just this year, in those document set of pages. I've had this security manual for the security guards for like 15 years. And basically,
it's the same manual that they released.
It's in there. You can look it up. It's Det 3, Security Police. It's a manual that just tells, the operations for the guards. Once you have a job, you work there. It shows what the badges look like at 51 at that time for their passes, which was stuff that I would hold back. Because as a researcher, you hold back data. You don't tell everything because you need some things to keep back. Like, for instance, like how do you pay for your food at the base? If somebody tells me they work there, I can throw them curveball questions, things that I know about Area 51 that nobody knows. They don't tell me the answer, then I know they're,
Well, the truth is always in the details.
Yeah, so,
always in the
you
details.
always have to keep things as a researcher that you don't, you can't divulge, you can't publish or whatever. So, but there's things like this that we kept, and it does show the sensors, the ground sensors that the guards, when you come to the base, would detect metal. These are sensors that were made by Joslin Defense Systems.
In this guard manual, is there one thing that said, was there anything crazy, any shoot to kill, anything about what to do with anybody that is caught?
Well, yeah, it tells their operations and stuff. It shows the building numbers at Area 51. It has some, info about the base that you could kind of, nothing secret, but the guards are just there to do their job, And there was one incident that Glenn Campbell and I were hiking to Freedom Ridge once, and this is a kind of a wild story. And we're hiking up the hill, and we see all these cars coming to the base, like these tourists are going, man, these guys are going kind of fast. Like, they should slow down because the base, when you come down Groom Lake Road, it's kind of, a lot of people don't know they're coming onto the border because there's this turn. There's a sharp right turn, and all of a sudden there's the signs. But if you don't know that, if you're going down this long road for 12 miles and you're going fast, you might just blow right through that, right? If you're not careful. So these guys in a truck, and they come blowing through. We're like going, who are these guys? Like, what a bunch of idiots, So they come blowing through the sign. We're on top of the hill. We can see right into the guard, at the guard shack we can see. And then we see the guys, pull the people out, M16s on their heads and everything. And they call the sheriff, and the sheriff comes, and they have to arrest him and make him sign a document.
Was it Bob Lazar?
No. But they make him sign a document that you can never come here. If this happens again, they have to pay a fine.
Was it Sean Morton?
No. But they have to go to Alamo, where the sheriff's at in Alamo, Nevada, and they have to, basically pay a fine. And it basically says they can never, if they do that again, they'll be thrown in jail for like 20 years or whatever, though, but they pay a heavy fine for that. But we did see, the guards pointing guns at people and all that stuff. So it was kind of a wild story.
Have you ever heard, and there's nothing ever really concrete, but have you ever heard of anybody actually getting arrested and being taken somewhere? I mean, what would the holding cell be like at Area 51?
Well, they don't take it Area 51, they take it Alamo. I mean, these people were arrested and they were taken to the sheriff's, which is Alamo. It's a 45-minute drive from Rachel, Nevada, Area 51, basically.
And that's a sheriff substation?
Yeah, that's the sheriff that has a contract with the base and what have you. When any type of trouble happens, he's kind of the liaison to the base for people that don't work there, kind of thing.
Have you ever been confronted by the security?
I can tell you stories up and down the block.
Well, let's go. Now's your chance.
We used to do crazy things, and Glenn used to do things like this too. We do things like we drive up to the border in our cars, park the car off the side of the road right before the border, and Glenn did these things, like funny things, like he'd get in the back of the car and they'd throw a blanket over his head and over his whole body, so the guards come and freak out. They can't see anybody in the car, so they're freaking out. They have to find you, right? Because they don't know. They see a car by the border. They don't know if you hiked in, right? So their job is to physically find that person. So they're flashing the lights in the car. They don't see anybody, so they pull out the
Pave hawk
or whatever, and they got to find you. So he would spend the night in the car, and the next day just pull tricks with them and jump in the car the next day. But we used to monitor the frequencies and stuff, so we always had kind of the ante up on them, that kind of thing. So yeah, there's one incident there, where we'd do things like that too, and they chase, they'd send the
pave hawk
after us, and then I'd pop out of a bush and get a good shot of the
pave hawk.
There were many times where we'd hide and get. I'd have tons of videotape of guards. I'm eventually going to post it. Eventually, I have but eventually I'm going to post this stuff on YouTube. I got years of video data that's just insane. But there's all kinds of stories like that. There was a time where we once cornered the guards. We were with a reporter from the New York Times, and we were with Glenn and a bunch of other guys at 4-bys, and we took this reporter out to kind of confront the guards in the north side of Area 51, and we actually cornered this guard and made a circle around him and cornered him so we could get the New York Times guy to kind of confront him. He was stuck because he couldn't have the whole thing on audio tape because we were recording his frequencies, but he was stuck. So the New York Times reporter jumped out and asked the guy, like, who do you work for? And they said the usual tagline, which is the Nellis Range, and this is all.
Was he driving one of the infamous white?
Yes, the early white. They're different colors now, but then there were the white Cherokee.
Yeah,
Jeeps,
white Jeeps.
Yeah, and so he confronted him, and he said the Nellis. I work for the Nellis Test Range. He's not going to say he works for.
Now this is 25 years ago.
Yeah, 20 years ago.
Yeah,
like 93 maybe.
I got stuck in the middle of one of them. Gail told me he was from the New York Times.
93. So yeah, 20 years ago, and I guess for everybody out there listening, when you're telling a story like this, well, it's firsthand. But Glenn Campbell, I mentioned earlier about UFOmind.com.
Yeah, it's written about that on UFOmind.com.
But you're with the guy that started that website. It's you guys out there together, and you're out there playing possum with the guards from Area 51. I just want everybody to understand exactly what you're trying to say here. And that's a pretty heavy thought, and it's a pretty heavy thing to say. Obviously, it happened, and you recorded everything. But it's just a fascinating story.
Yeah, there's another incident where we used to run along we used to do this, which would really kind of get to him. I did this at Tonopah once. We'd take our 4-bys and start, hauling ass down the road right coming up to the guard gate, and then they always have roads that run along the border or and I knew this, so we were hauling ass up and we make a quick left, and they see us because there's a guard check, so they freak because they're like, who are these guys, and we're going down the border. I mean, this is because I videotape a lot of things out there as far as doing research. I wanted to get a lot of stuff on videotape, so we're hauling ass, and they of course send a guard after us, and they actually pulled us over or tried to pull us over, and they got M16s and stuff, and I'm trying to videotape all this stuff, and they're all worried. What do you go taping all this, their air rays or whatever, their microwaves, or just I'm trying to tape stuff around the base, and they come up and they see us, we're sitting there with scanners in our car.
Right.
We got scanners and antennas on the roof and everything, and say they know we're monitoring them, and then I'm telling you, I got video cameras and everything. I got patches on my jacket like Area 51, all this crazy stuff. So it's like. And it gets kind of hectic. I've taken many people out there where they're almost like, pissing in their pants and sweating because, these guards are chasing you. And some people get a little, it can be a little sketchy at times.
Now, it sounds like this is just fascinating to me. It sounds like you were always a step ahead of the guards.
Yes.
You could see their lights. You're out there at night and so forth. Did you ever get snuck up on? Did you ever get caught?
Well, there's one time where
there's ground sensors.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of heat. There's vibration. Everything is everything is monitored. Did you ever get snuck up on?
Well, we had frequencies to the sensors, so we used to flip the dip switches on the sensors. The guards never knew this, but we used to flip the. Okay, so you're talking. There's a sensor on Groom Lake Road, which is where most of the tourists take to go to Area 51, and we knew where all the sensors was because there was a guy that actually tripped over one. He was walking out there, so he brought it to Glenn, and we started kind of doing research on him and stuff like that. So we used to trip the sensors so the guards would think they're going into the west side of the base where they're going to the other side of the base because we tripped the sensors, we flipped the dip switches. So this was stuff like, we could come into to Groom Lake Road and trip sensors on purpose, and they start heading toward the north side of the base.
So when you say
like
dip
that.
switch, I want everybody to understand a dip switch is a series of switches, or it could be one, but it's usually a series of 4 little tiny switches that you can turn on and off. A dip switch is what is inside of your garage door opener.
Right.
That's a dip switch. Right. So you're going up on these ground sensors and these vibration sensors and turning them off?
Well,
is that essentially what you're doing?
We know what the dip switch settings were on the north side of the base, so we take that and make it so it's on the other side of the base. So we'd flip them. And what that did is it sent a false signal to the guards. They're thinking somebody's coming on this side of the base, and then they go to that side of the base, and then we'd be able to go in and get our pictures.
You were turning an elite guard force into frickin' frack.
Yeah.
And they were running around all over the place.
Yeah.
And you videotaped.
Yeah.
Oh, that is absolutely incredible.
It would make us so they would go to the north side, so we'd be able to go into the other side, which is like 10 miles away, and I'd be able to get up to the mountain and shoot video of the base. So I'd have it for documentaries or whatever, what have you. So they, we kind of we played a lot of cat and mouse back then.
Did you ever see Aurora? Any proof of that?
Well, I spent so many times out there. I used to go out there like 4 or 5 times a year. I know everybody. I know Pat really well, Little Alien, everybody there. I knew Joe Travis really well. He's passed on. I
just got text in from somebody in Florida, and they said, "Well, the guards know now."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they know now, but actually, the sensors there are different now. These were the early sensors. They have actually changed them since.
Okay, back to Aurora. Did you ever see Aurora? The elusive Aurora.
No, well, the Aurora was a plane that was supposed was creating the skyquakes coming in from California that people felt.
And the skyquakes have stopped. Yeah. I mean, I remember those constantly, and they've stopped. But back to the point, did you ever see anything like that?
No, but it was the Aurora was like I think it was a McDonnell Douglas bird, and it was kind of funded, but then it kind of they went with something else that dropped out. But back in 93, 94, we were already monitoring the drones. Back in 93, coming off of Nellis and stuff, we already knew that they were doing a lot of big drone testing and things like that.
Well, they're testing something out there. What is it that you saw?
Well, I didn't, like I said, until that 93 event, that's the only thing I saw. Everything else we were monitoring, like B-2s, stealths. I got tons of video of them doing war games. They do a lot of war games out there, MiGs and, jets flying over your head, the British plane. I mean, just everything. Like you'll see stealths getting refueled out there, just all kinds of stuff. Phantoms. We used to go visit the Phantom crashes up there and everything. There's just a lot of guys, researchers that are just really big into trying to find out what's going on. And I spent a lot of time on ridges up there, but until 93, after 93, I never really saw anything besides regular aircraft.
It's the longest runway in the world, right?
Yeah.
It's like the longest, and they've just made it longer.
Yeah,
So it begs to ask the question, why?
Well, the reason they extended the runways to the B-2 because the B-2 takes a long time to land, to physically land, because it just wants to stay up. It takes a long time for that thing to land. That's why they had to extend the runway. It was for the B-2. But now they have that hangar out there. You know about the hangar? They've been building that for years. That really big hangar. It's bigger than the other hangar that's out there.
Well, I've seen the pictures. I've seen the pictures, but
some people believe there might be like one of those stealth blimps in there, or no. They actually from Tickaboo Peak, which is another vantage point into Area 51. They actually when they started building this hangar, they already actually knew there were guys like us up there monitoring the base, so they would actually built the workers inside Area 51 built this dirt mountain in front of the hangar to kind of block people like us from looking into this hangar to see what's coming in or out of it. Mm-hmm. But everything they do at night, they go, nighttime they go, all the testing is done at night. And there's a reason why they do. Most of the testing goes on during a new moon because there's no moon. They're not going to test during a full moon because you can see, as well as I know, you're out in the desert, in the middle of the desert, and the moon's full moon. You can see really, really well. I mean, the moon's like a great light bulb, right? You can look next to you. Now, when it's a new moon, you can't see a foot. You're out at Area 51, you can't see a foot in front of you or 2 feet when there's a new moon. I mean, it is dark,
Right.
So that's when they do most of their testing, when it's a new moon.
At the top of the hour, we are going to start taking your calls. So I'm going to release the number now to Skype. It is Fade to Black. Fade to Black. No spaces. And the number 14. No spaces. Again, Fade to Black. 14.
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
JJCR in your face.
JimmyChurchRadio.com.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.